President Marcos' declaration of martial law was a significant event that contributed to the development of nationalism in the Philippines. The Marcos regime revolved around family-based rule and corruption. It has been labeled a constitutional authoritarian and bureaucratic authority. He believed that the proclamation of martial law in 1972 was a way to prevent violent revolution against the government by the communist rebels. The new constitution was heavily manipulated by Marcos that it was not the law of the land, but rather Marcos's own. The three branches of the government, as well as the media establishments and utilities, were heavily controlled by the Philippine Armed Forces. He based his high-ranking officials on loyalty rather than experience and seniority. But first, what happened before the proclamation of martial law? During the privileged speech of Ninoy Aquino, who is a known critic of Marcos, exposed Oplan Secretaries, which was the platform used to mandate martial law. However, Marcos denied that he planned to impose martial law and that the plan was a contingency study. A month after, they learned that the martial law declaration was made possible due to the collaboration of 12 men, which were later called the Rolex 12. On September 20, 1972, the fabricated car ambush of Juan Ponce Enrile was one of the reasons of the immediate proclamation of martial law. Thus, the consecutive events proved Ninoy Aquino right. Amidst his tyranny, several issues have risen, most of which are violating basic human rights. These include the right to speech, right to freedom, right to life, right to protection and security, right to due process, and the right to remain innocent until proven guilty. According to the primary source, in the case of Hilda Narciso, she was arrested without any warrant and evidence. She was brought to the military safe house, wherein she was sexually abused by several military men. She was kept in jail and was accused of being a communist. This is an example of violating right to safety and right to remain innocent until proven guilty. As mentioned before, the media was controlled by Marcos and his men, and because of this, the voice of the people were suppressed, and they were forbidden to say anything that was occurring in order to blind and silence the people. This is an example of violation of the right to freedom and speech. Many forms of abuses in his era include brutal killings, torture, exile of opponents, wrongful imprisonments, and the disappearing of thousands. The victims were usually those whom they thought was communist rebels and anti-Marcos. Most journalists who tried to publish blasphemous contents about his regime was captured, tortured, and killed as a way of preventing the truth to be heard. Teodoro Locsin Sr., publisher of the Philippine Free Press, together with the publisher of Manila Times, Chino Roses, and several well-known journalists were imprisoned during the first week of martial law. Now would you think, how could these men do such inhumanities? The people, specifically the military and the police, believed that their heinous actions were justifiable. They believed that the harming and killing of others were acceptable if they were the enemies and traitors. This led to the violation of basic human rights. The police and the military both objectified and dehumanized the people of the nation. Due to the issue that was prevalent during the Marcos regime, we can say that it was relevant when it comes to the development of the Philippines as a nation. To simplify things, we can say that history repeated itself. Not in a direct sense, but we can use the abuses of the friars as an analogy. Of course, when there are people that are oppressed, they will eventually fight back against the oppressors. During Marx's time, we can safely say that him, the police, and the military are the oppressors. Meanwhile, the people were the ones being oppressed. This eventually led to the people banding together and revolting to the ones in power. This was evident when the people were abused by both the police and the military, and brutalities which were abundant at the time. They were stormed in their very own homes and were taken away against their will. People were being arrested with no evidence and were being taken advantage of for personal reasons. The issues that were present during Marcos' regime is still very much relevant today. The issues that people faced back then was brought back into the limelight when Marcos was buried in the Heroes Cemetery on November 18, 2016. This all started on November 8, 2016, when the Supreme Court decided that Marcos should be buried there. This prompted the people who personally experienced the issues back then and the ones who felt the consequences of what happened to rally and fight for their rights, saying that
Marcos was never a hero.